Okay, so bonjour tout le monde. I'm Pam Eastfeld, the president of PAFSO, and you are here at this information session for members who are interested in running for the executive committee of PAFSO starting in the fall of 2021. So thank you very much for coming. I have a fairly detailed deck to go through with that just really explains what the parameters are for what's involved in being on ExCom, and so I'm just going to go through it. Before I start, though, I would just like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory, or I'm hosting from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and we acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And also to recognize that we are coming up on day 1000 of the detention of our friend and colleague, Michael Kovrig, and the imprisonment of our fellow Canadian, Michael Spavor. And, we're thinking of them as we're doing all of these things, because Michael Kovrig cannot be here with us as we do all kinds of good things like run for ExCom and organize ourselves for PAFSO. So we just like to take a moment at all our events to acknowledge his situation and that it could be any of us, and that we miss him. So I'm just going to I'll go through the terms of reference for PAFSO executive committee members, the code of conduct, both of these things that you would commit to. You've been asked to sign on if you are nominating yourself or being nominated for an executive committee position. And then some of the projects and the issues that we're dealing with right now, and that you could expect to be engaged on as an executive committee member. And then some questions. And I apologize, there go the dogs as promised in the background. Hopefully that will settle down for a second. Actually, I'm just going to pause the recording. So I will just go through that. C'est une session bilingue. S'il vous plaît, participez dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Je vais donner le plus de la présentation en anglais, mais je suis capable de répondre aux questions. Our principal objective is to inform you about what you would be getting into, your obligations and duties and responsibilities as an ExCom member. We're recording this so that everybody else can watch after. And please use the chat or question function in the middle of the presentation, and I will pause periodically for voice questions if you want to, but be aware that you are being recorded if you're speaking. So the executive committee terms of reference, those are a fairly new thing that we adopted at the AGM in October 2021. They define the role of the executive committee, and they outline how we operate and how we carry out our fiduciary and other duties on behalf of the membership of the association in accordance with our mission, vision, and values, which were adopted as part of the strategic review the year before. This was kind of a big deal for PAFSO because we had never had, in the 53 years at that point, or 54 years of PAFSO's existence, we had never had a strategic review, and we had never had an explicit statement of our values. So we did that. And you'll notice when we have the vote on the full-time presidency that'll come up, there's constitutional amendments associated with that. And we're also asking people to formally adopt the PAFSO values, which the main thing is, to include diversity and inclusion in that as actually part of the Constitution, because that was not something that was really on the agenda back in 1967. So these complement Article 6 of the Constitution, and they apply to the executive committee, which includes the president, executive vice president, and the treasurer, the executive director, or a senior PAFSO staff member, and all of our employees, officers, and volunteers. So basically, like if you're working on something to do with PAFSO, we expect these will apply to you. So there are a number of fiduciary duties associated with membership on a board. PAFSO is and has to be, as all unions are, incorporated somewhere as a nonprofit. So we're incorporated in Ontario, and there are certain fiduciary duties that go along with being a member of a nonprofit board, and also, go along with being on the board of a union. So, we give strategic direction to the executive director, who deals with the daily business affairs of the association. We're elected to the committee to bring the perspectives of our streams, but it has to be the interests of the association itself, which are top of mind. That's our duty, to represent the interests of the association. So from time to time, it's not obvious that, that it's not always the same. It doesn't happen very often, but every so often there could be something that, say, a particular stream doesn't really want done, but we have to look at the good of the association as a whole. So that's why en anglais, il y a la distinction de representatives of versus for. And I'm not sure why I didn't know how to explain that in French, but it's basically like, you're elected to bring the perspectives, but you're not required, like you don't carry a vote the same way it would if it was defined as representatives for. But there's a reason that we have the different streams, and that we have a minimum of 2 people from each stream, because we know, we want to make sure we can understand stuff. There's also the standard fiduciary duties of diligence, loyalty, and obedience. We expect everybody to act honestly and in good faith, and to exercise their due diligence in their functions. So, not just to kind of, take things casually and kind of blow things off. And, sometimes it can get, it can get serious, right? I mean, in the past, we have had issues where, the executive committee has had to take decisions about, about staffing and about somebody's continued employment with the association, things like that. And you can't just, as an executive committee member, you can't say, well, I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want to take a decision on that. You have to. It's part of the duties. And we have insurance, liability insurance, for executive committee members who are performing their duties as PAFSO executive, but it requires that everything is done in good faith, and that proper due diligence is exercised. One of the key duties of the executive committee is the annual evaluation of the executive director, who is subject to a performance agreement, and who gets is subject to a review and a performance bonus that is assigned every year. So there is a staff relations committee that works with me and establishes those goals, reviews those goals, and then I discuss periodically where we are with the executive director, and I make a recommendation to them on what the rating and the associated bonus should be. And we vote on that at an in-camera session. So, this is different than in the past. Previous years, the executive director did not have an annual performance review, didn't have a bonus. And this way, right now, the way our executive director's salary works is, she does not get sort of annual increments, like there's no sort of elevator clause in the contract. She gets a performance bonus that is not applied to the base of her salary. So it's like, it's every year, it's really an assessment of how did you perform, and what will the amount be for this year. It's not like you get 10% or 8% one year, salary is up by 8%, and then the next year the bonus is on the previous year's salary plus the 8% and assigned on the basis of that. It's each year a performance bonus on the base salary. So, it is, it's a serious responsibility. It makes a difference to what the person's pay will be. Executive committee is also responsible for overseeing developing the strategic plan and overseeing the operational plans. So in 2019, we did a strategic review. We developed a strategic plan that is valid from 2021 to 2023. That was adopted formally at last year's annual general meeting. We report to the annual general meeting on where we are with the plan. And then we also approve the budget that's prepared and recommended by the executive director or the senior staff member together with the treasurer. We approve any large projects. We look at the quarterly financial statements, and we just make sure we're responsible as part of our fiduciary duties for making sure that everything is done in conformity with the policies of the association. There are also a number of committees and task forces. There are 2 standing committees that are in our Constitution. The Collective Bargaining Committee deals with negotiations and other issues related to the FS collective agreement. And our current collective agreement expires in June next year. So we are starting a bargaining cycle. We expect, probably to give notice to bargain sometime like in, the first quarter, toward the end of the first quarter of next year, depending, what's going on. And so we're in the process of developing our positions and figuring out what we need to ask. Some of you might have spoken to our GBA Plus person doing a GBA Plus framework analysis to guide our analysis of the collective agreement and to help us figure out like what we should be asking for to address, maybe some of the issues linked to intersectionality and other things that have not really been foreseen in the collective agreement up until now. So that's part of that. There's also the professional committee that's responsible for issues outside hardcore collective bargaining that are related to the Foreign Service as a profession, including professional development and training and advocacy to a certain extent. Right now we have others that are linked to specific issues. There's a finance committee that is made up of me, the executive vice president, the treasurer, and the executive director and finance officer, although the finance officer doesn't have a vote, he's a resource person. And we meet monthly or more often and, make sure the budget's on track and approve expenditures and so on. We have a staff relations committee because our staff are unionized. And so we have a committee that deals with any issues surrounding that. They are also in the process of negotiating we're about to start negotiating their second collective agreement. And so that committee is responsible for that. We have a governance committee, which is responsible for things like these terms of reference that I was explaining to you. They were responsible for leading on the analysis of the full-time presidency pilot and making proposals on what happens next with that. We have a communications committee that does sort of communications and advocacy. And then we have some task forces. We call them task forces if they're dealing with, specific issues and projects rather than committees. So we had actually, I should change that because the Buddha Papier Revitalization Task Force is done. It's revitalized. We have a new editor and we're looking at digitization and so on. We have a task force that will probably wrap up as a task force soon on integration of the FSIA stream, partly because we recognize that when the MCO stream was brought on board, there maybe were a few things that could have been done back, 6 years ago that might have made it easier to integrate them and make them feel like a part of things in PAFSO and also help our executive committee and staff understand their needs a little bit better. So we wanted to make sure that we did that for the FSIA. And I think we we've got some good feedback and good information out of that one. Basically, if you're on executive committee, we think everybody should be on at least one committee or task force. So, altogether, like that would be, probably about 4 hours a month, about an hour a week of your time for meetings, and then also for, the work that's associated with that. So, with the executive committee meeting, you're looking at about 7 to 8 hours a month of time commitment if you're on executive committee, between reading the stuff that's associated with it, coming to the meetings themselves. Now we used to meet every month we still meet every month on the third Thursday of each month. But what we've decided to do as of this summer is, rather than having 12 regular meetings, having a regular meeting every month that counts towards people's attendance, because if you miss too many meetings, you're deemed to sort of have resigned from the ExCom, and we can come to you and say, hey, you're not showing up. So, we're not on the committee anymore and we might need to replace you. But what we've decided to do is we're going to have those regular meetings 8 times a month, 8 times a year. And then the other third Thursdays of each month, we will use for what we call committee of the whole, informal discussions of larger issues. Because what we were finding was, we have a lot of decisions generally to make at the regular meetings. And we just didn't have time for some of the deeper discussions that we need. Plus, we had we have months where it's, attendance would always be quite low just due to life. So what we're going to do is we'll have regular meetings each month: August, September, October, November. December will be a committee of the whole / sort of Christmas mixer type event, because that's when you'll have the new members that you can really start to integrate. January will be a regular meeting, but on strategic planning. Then February is a regular meeting. March we will skip and we'll skip the regular meeting, have a committee of the whole. April is a regular meeting. May will be a committee of the whole. June is a regular meeting. July will be a committee of the whole, and that makes life quite a bit easier because people are wanting to have summer holidays and so on. We're going to do that. And hopefully that will ease up on some of the time pressures. We always have the meetings on Zoom. We started this out of necessity when the pandemic hit. And what we've realized is that, as long as I'm chairing these things, I don't intend to go back to in-person meetings. They take up a lot of time. They're over lunch hour. People have to get there. People have to be fed. There's always disruption in getting the food in the room. Plus, we have a lot of remote members now. The bringing in remote members was an innovation from 2019. And we now have, I think it's 5 of our current committee that are serving remotely, and it works really well. But it's much easier if everyone is calling in remotely rather than trying to do a hybrid thing with some people in the room. So when we're able to do face-to-face things, which hopefully someday in the future, what I would suggest is that maybe for like twice a year or maybe once a quarter they have some kind of face-to-face event, but that we continue with the remote things. Normally there is a prep meeting the week before the second week of the month. And that's where I send out the list of items that I have for the agenda. I ask anybody if they have anything else. If people want background or don't understand what something is about, it is a chance to have that sort of informal discussion. If someone wants to put something on the agenda, it's a chance for me to talk to them and make sure that I understand what it is that they want to do. And yeah, it seems to work really well. And you'll always get the documents a week before the meeting happens. So we don't normally, we keep minutes, we keep a record of attendance. We don't normally record individual votes of members. We just record, carried or not carried, unless somebody asks. If someone is really, doesn't like something, or was the only person in favor of something and wants it on the record that, hey, I voted for or against this, we will record the member's name in those instances, but we don't normally. So those are available to members who ask, those minutes, but without members' names, because it's not standard practice, and it also I think sometimes can kind of inhibit discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Des questions, commentaires about that long part of text?
So I do have a question in regards to the timing of the Zoom meeting. So it's always set at noon on the Thursdays, regardless of the Ottawa time.
Yeah.
Just so that it can be planned accordingly for those that aren't necessarily in Ottawa.
So sorry, no. So what we do, it's always at noon Ottawa time, and we're kind of immovable on that, just because that's still the majority of people, and if we start moving it, we just cause confusion. We can have other meetings, we can set other meetings, depending on the availability of folks, but the regular ExCom meetings are at noon Ottawa time. So that's why I don't know if you noticed, like in your nomination thing, it says, if you're calling in remotely, we welcome remote members, but you will be expected to work on that Ottawa schedule, at least for the regular meetings. So where are you, Marcy? Do you mind saying?
I'm in Tunisia.
Ah, okay. So that's what, 6 hours?
5 and 6 or 5 and 4. I don't remember. Right now we're 5.
Okay, so it would catch you right at the end of your workday, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. I know. We didn't sort of set any requirements to say to people like, okay, look, you can serve remotely if you're like in these time zones, but not in these. We left it open. We have right now two people calling in from Europe, and it seems to work okay. They're 5 or 6 hours. It seems to be okay for them for the major meetings. But when we first started this, we had somebody who was calling from like somewhere in the South Pacific, and it was like 12 hours ahead or something like that, and that fell by the wayside pretty quick. Like I felt kind of sorry for them, because they gave it a good try and they were trying to help us, but the 12 or whatever hour time difference it was just not manageable. So that might be something that you might want to give some thought to, because we'll be catching you right at the end of your workday supper time for those things. So Gwen, any questions from you, comments?
So one comment would be, I noticed that there weren't any FPDS positions available. Is that correct?
No, so we have currently the two designated FPDS positions are filled, but we do have two what we call at-large positions that are coming open. So so FPDS members are still eligible for those. And then what happens, you still count as a representative like for your stream. So if any of the positions, like any of the FPDS, the two FPDS people jobs came open, someone who is like in an at-large position would just move over into an FPDS position, and then it would be an at-large position that came vacant, say if we were looking to, like, if we needed to replace anyone. That makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, so I'll just go through. I just wanted to run through quickly the code of conduct and, you know, the main things. So we ask everyone to review the code of conduct and the conflict of interest guidelines and acknowledge support and understanding each year. So it's like, you know, you're elected, and then, you know, as when we reconstitute the committee, we ask everybody to reaffirm their understanding and commitment. And so that's part of the nomination process. There's a box that you need to check. And, you know, we don't expect that it's gonna cover every situation that comes up with the executive committee. But basically, you know, we're expecting everybody to operate with integrity and good faith, with professionalism, you know, and conform to the mission and values and the vision of PAFSO. And, you know, the bottom line is that, I mean, executive committee members have to be careful not to act in a way that will bring disrepute to the organization. If anyone is found to have violated those provisions, which thankfully, touch wood, so far we haven't had any of these cases, you know, violations would be reported to me for referral to the governance committee or to the executive vice president if the problem involved the president. If members who are found to be in violation of the code could be asked to resign by the governance committee if they feel that the issue is serious enough. I mean, they would, you know, obviously talk to the person and find out what's going on. If it can't be resolved, you know, at the governance committee level, they could take the matter to the full executive committee to be decided by a majority vote. The executive committee can impose penalties up to and including dismissal from the committee. And if the, you know, if the problem was serious enough, they could add that the person is ineligible for future service for a time period, depending how serious that would be, and determined by the members of the executive committee. So, I mean, the key points in that code of conduct is, you know, privacy of information. You know, we know sometimes as executive committee members, we come across information that is not accessible to the public or the general membership. You know, we need to respect that. Sometimes, you know, rarely, but sometimes it's information related to members, you know, to our colleagues. And I mean, we do try to maintain a fairly strict separation between our labor relations, like casework, which is handled by the labor relations team in the office, the professional side, professional team, and the executive committee. But, you know, from time to time you hear things, and we expect everybody to take all reasonable measures to protect the information that they get. You know, we ask people not to comment publicly on social media platforms concerning the discussions at the executive committee. We have at the end of each committee, we agree on, like, usually, you know, 3 major points of things that we're gonna, you know, discuss, take to the membership and talk about as what went on at that meeting. And you know, that's a different thing. But, you know, we don't want people going out and saying, well, so-and-so, you know, there was a big discussion and so-and-so was the only person who voted against something, or, you know, or those kinds of things. We expect, you know, those discussions need to be confidential so that that they can be robust. You know, and if people are commenting on issues related to, you know, the general mandate of PAFSO, or you know, things that the general membership is discussing, we ask people to make it clear that when they're speaking in a personal capacity and not as a member of the executive committee. I mean, we don't want to muzzle people and say that you can't have opinions as a general member. That kind of defeats the point. But you know, we want to make clear when you're acting for PAFSO and when you're not. We also ask everyone as part of this code of conduct to prepare for effective decision making. You know, make sure you've reviewed the documentation, participate in any preparatory meetings or any presentations before, and in order to get more background if you need to, and also to reach out to me or, you know, the executive director or other colleagues to make sure you're prepared. And that's really to avoid, you know, having discussions go off into detail where somebody needs history of something explained to them, because we generally have quite a tight decision-making agenda at the actual meetings. You know, and we expect people to promote an inclusive environment and make sure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity, you know, that there's we're all free from harassment and discriminations. We expect everybody to support ExCom decisions after they're made, even if they didn't vote for the decision, and to communicate externally with one voice. You know, we don't want people going out and undermining decisions of the executive committee after they have been made. We also just added some new points. Part of my job as president is to flag when there need to be additions, and we just added 2 new points this year. One of them was on the executive committee's responsibility to uphold the collective agreement ourselves in our own conduct. So, you know, if we're managers, you know, we should not be telling our staff that they can't claim overtime if they can, and you know, if the provisions of the collective agreement are there. We also should not be working unpaid overtime and things like that ourselves, you know, because those kind of provisions are hard fought. And if word gets out that even the executive committee members themselves are not claiming and are just working for free, you know, that hurts us as a collective. We also added something because somebody apparently didn't like a decision that one of the labor relations advisors didn't like the advice that they were getting, and told this person that they were going to join the executive committee and make their lives miserable. So it was like, no, you're not. And I guess maybe we need to put that in the code of conduct that, you know, you can't use your position on executive committee to, you know, to force an outcome or to force use of resources on something that that would not normally be done because you're on the executive committee. I mean, we do say inappropriately influence decisions on labor relations issues, because some labor relations issues are broader and they're actually like policy decisions. You know, one of the big discussions that we've had at ExCom was on this new idea of a vaccination mandate for the federal public service, and what should our position be, and, you know, and in that case, that's a policy decision where, yes, we do influence the way those labor relations issues are going to be handled, but it's appropriate. It's not somebody saying, I don't like the way this goes and I'm going to make your life miserable. Anybody have any questions or comments about that? So hearing, oh, Marcy? No, sorry. I thought your little microphone went off, but I'm hearing none. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is some of our current issues. So things we're working on, the COVID-19 response. That's probably a good, I don't know, full quarter, maybe even longer of every meeting that we have, and it's probably right now a good close to half my time. And more for the office, the labor relations team and the executive director, especially when you consider, you know, all of the grievances and complaints and issues that are coming up with the department's Global Affairs Canada's management of the FSDs and so on. You know, we have ongoing issues and concerns linked to COVID of occupational health and safety. I mean, the Havana syndrome situation was previous to COVID was the big manifestation of that. So all the issues related to duty of care and how things are managed, also to psychological health and well-being in the workplace, which is now part of the department's obligation is now psychological hazards in the workplace now fall under this occupational health and safety banner. And so we're concerned about seeing how that is implemented. We have issues to follow up on the next steps in the strategic plan, continuing our GBA plus analysis and the other things. You can find the plan on the MyPAFSO website if you want to look at the details of that. We're developing our intersectional and GBA plus approach, not just to negotiations and the FSDs, but we're also developing our awareness as an association of how we should be operating ourselves, and how we can be more inclusive, and what our responsibilities are on the whole Indigenous reconciliation issue, how we should be integrating those issues into our training, and so on and so forth. Ongoing issues of human resources, staffing, and competitions, even though those are not in the collective agreement, of course, they're very important to our members, and how things are going to be handled, and what priorities are for postings and so on when competitions are coming up, all those kinds of things. We're getting ready for the next round of the FSD triennial review. And we will launch in September our triennial survey, which will include some detailed questions to everybody on, what are the issues in the FSDs, and how, give us some ideas on what we should be asking for and how we should be following up. We're going to be doing the same on the next round of bargaining. We'll be dealing with some of the governance issues after the vote on the future of the full-time presidency. We'll be recommending in our vote that members adopt this as a permanent part of the PAFSO structure, but that then will require, there'll still be some work on integrating that, making sure, trying to figure out in more detail how the permanent full-time president will operate alongside the executive director, the senior staff member. We need to figure out once and for all what's going to be the future of Buddha Papier. We relaunched, and we're giving it some time to digitize and see what the audience will be, but then there's going to be a time in the last year of our strategic plan, we're going to be reviewing all of our programming. And that's when, we'll be looking at the BOO, looking at the FS awards, looking at all the various things that we do and saying, okay, is this effective? Are we getting value for money? Does this still serve us in, it'll be 2023 by that time? Are these things still what we want to do? The most effective ways of getting our stuff done. And yeah, there will be a lot more. Basically, so summing up, the deadline is 27th of August, which is, oh man, which is coming up. It's like, if you want more details, you can go onto the website, it's the news item for the AGM at the bottom. That's where you can find the nomination forms and all of the details. We have 10 positions available, which is 2/3 of the executive committee, 2 trade, 2 immigration, 2 FSIA, 2 MCO. So all their members are rotating. I mean, I'm hoping at least a couple of them will decide to return for a second term, but their positions are open. And then we have the 2 member at large positions that are also open. And we've got a lot to do. I mean, really PAFSO has been really busy this past couple of years. Members are coming to us more, recognizing our advocacy role and what we can do for them, which is great, but it does mean that there's more work to be done. And so, I think it's a great opportunity to start working on ExCom. I mean, you get to interact with senior people in both GAC and IRCC, at levels that may not be open to you, that certainly were not open to me as a deputy director at GAC. You get to deal with all kinds of issues that will affect you and your colleagues into the future. You know, we do training, and there's opportunities, you know, for all kinds of different things like that. There's opportunities to represent sometimes the association at conferences and meetings. And I'm hoping that, you know, when we can start traveling again, I would like to start doing outreach to our members. I had started in February. I got out to meet with some of our members in Seattle and Vancouver in the fall of 2019. And in February, I did a trip to Calgary for a conference. And so I met with our members at the regional offices in Calgary and Edmonton. And then I got back just as, you know, the country was shutting down for COVID. And so that was that. So it's been virtual outreach, you know, for the past almost 18 months, but hopefully we will get back to where we can do that. And, you know, sometimes there is an opportunity for that. And also, you know, for people who are located outside the NCR, you know, maybe an opportunity to do research outreach or inreach in, you know, in your neighborhood. I mean, that might be an option for some of those things. So, you know, there's all kinds of personal and professional reasons that working with the executive committee can be a really good experience. So I hope you'll consider it. And I will now open up the floor to more questions and comments if anybody has any. I'm not seeing any, so I will thank you guys, and I will stop the recording. And there we are.